Today we remember and we give thanks to God for the life of a young man, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, a man who managed to enter through the narrow gate, as we just heard about in the gospel. Growing up, I can remember hearing my grandfather's complete name was Francis Aloysius Shea. I always thought that Aloysius was such a cool name, partly because of my grandfather. And I knew that people chose saints for their first and their middle names, but I didn't know the story behind that name, one that I'm sure inspired my grandfather, who was a man who was dedicated to the Eucharist, interior prayer, and charitable works. You know, it's fitting that we celebrate St. Aloysius with today's readings, for it causes us to reflect on two royal men and what their paths in life can show us. In our first reading, it speaks of a king who refused to believe and listen to God, resulting in his defeat. Aloysius, also born into nobility, however, took a much different path. The son of the king, he was truly privileged from an earthly standpoint, and yet God's grace was surely at work in his life as he was drawn to prayer and penance from a very young age. Incidentally, it was his mom who really encouraged and nurtured this. And if you get a chance, go online and take a look at a letter that St. Aloysius wrote to his mother in Thanksgiving. In any event, this led him to forego wealth and power, and then to enter the Jesuits. And in doing so, he entered the narrow gate that God intended for him. He dreamed of being a missionary for Christ. But as we know, as often happens, fate intervenes. A plague gripped the city of Rome, and Aloysius volunteered to minister to the sick in his local hospital. He embraced God's mission for him with the same zeal that he had in traveling to foreign lands, and he used the gifts that God had given him to be an instrument of grace to those who were suffering and dying. He chose to bring the presence of Jesus to those most in need. Aloysius caught the plague and died 3 months later in the service of God and his fellow man. As I reflected and prayed over this wonderful life in today's readings, two lessons came to mind. The first is that no matter how wealthy or how poor we are, no matter how much earthly power or little power we possess, if we listen to God, we will find our vocation in life, and one that is rich in purpose. And secondly, though we might perceive where God is leading us to serve, he may need us to adapt our plans. We know this, right? To be where and with who we most need in serving his divine plan and not ours. My brothers and sisters, if we listen, pray, and yes, do penance like St. Aloysius, then we too can follow Jesus through that narrow gate and one day please God, join the saints in heaven. May God bless you and your families this holy day as each one of us seeks to find and go through that narrow gate with Jesus.